Preschool lesson for May 27th, 2012 is lesson 6, Jesus Dies and Lives Again, found in Mark 15 to Mark 16, chapter 5. Again, second week in a row, a lot of material. The biggest things to get across here, I guess, is the fact that Jesus truly died and Jesus truly rose again from the dead on Easter Sunday. And along with that, the fact that because Jesus did rise from the dead, we don't have to fear death any longer. Some of the storytelling items. The Jewish leaders had now decided that they could kill Jesus. He had said that he was the Christ, so in their set of laws, that was enough for him to be worthy of death. But they couldn't kill Jesus without Roman permission. So they had to take him to Pontius Pilate, who was the governor of the area, and convince him that Jesus was worthy of death. But here was the thing. They had made up a law, too, that if they came into contact with someone who wasn't Jewish before the Sabbath day, they were unclean. And then they could not celebrate the Sabbath, which is basically, I think I've described it before, the Passover Sabbath for the Jewish people was basically their Super Bowl, almost like Christmas and Easter wrapped into one. City of Jerusalem would triple in size during the Passover from all the Jewish people coming from all over the world to celebrate this one thing. So they couldn't go into Pilate's palace, otherwise they'd be unclean. That's why, if you've seen videos or different presentations of what this would have looked like, they're all out in the courtyard. The only reason Pilate was in town, this is kind of his part-time palace. He's in town because of the Passover, so a lot of people are coming into the city. He needs to be there for really events like this, like the Jewish leaders coming forward and telling them basically, wait, we want this man killed. So Pilate couldn't kill Jesus just because Jesus claimed to be God. He wasn't breaking a Roman law, so he's got to bring him inside for questioning. And he asked Jesus, "What's the deal? Why are these people so upset with you? They say you're a king." And Jesus says, it's not recorded in this Mark section, I believe, but he says, "My kingdom's not of this world. I am a king, but it wouldn't be a kingdom that you recognize." So he didn't look like much of a king from the outside, bruised and beaten by this point, but he was the king of all heaven and earth. So Pilate talks and talks and talks to him, and he knows Jesus isn't guilty of any crime, but he can't just let him go. Jewish leaders wouldn't allow that. So he tries a couple different strategies to work it out so Jesus can go free, or at least have a little bit less punishment than death, because he knows that's ridiculous. So once a year, it seems like a weird tradition to have, but it was something they did, was Pilate would release a prisoner back into the people. So he takes Barabbas, this man who was essentially a terrorist. He's a revolutionary, a guy that was in jail for killing people, and they said, or Pilate says, "Who should I let go? Jesus, who claims to be a king, or Barabbas, who kills people and who is this dangerous, dangerous man?" Thinking, of course, the people are going to say, "Yeah, give us Jesus." Out of the two choices, but to his surprise, they say, "Give us Barabbas." He says, "Okay." He tries another strategy. He takes Jesus out in front of the whole people, and he has Jesus beaten and whipped. Awful, awful stuff. And his plan is, if the people feel bad enough for Jesus, maybe they'll say, "Okay, he's gotten what's due him, just let him go, we're fine with that." But it doesn't help. The people are just more fired up to kill Jesus. And Pilate's scared. He can handle a certain amount of stuff here, but this guy's claiming that he's God, and he can tell this guy's a little bit different, and all these other people are saying he needs to die, so Pilate's a little bit in over his head. The other thing you need to understand about what was going on with Pilate is that he was in a really rough political situation. He'd already done a pretty lousy job as governor, and basically the Roman emperor had said, "If you screw up again, you're not going to be a ruler anymore. I'm going to take your job away from you." And so the Jewish leaders knew that. So they also knew if they could put a little pressure on Pilate that way and say, if this doesn't go well, we wouldn't want to have to go to the emperor and tell him that you did this very poorly. So Pilate's in a really rough spot. That doesn't excuse him for being such a weak guy here, but it helps you to understand that it's not as cut and dried as this guy's innocent, let him go. So a lot of political stuff at play. So finally the people shout that they want Jesus to be crucified, and again, think about that from Jesus' perspective, how difficult that must have been to hear your own people to stand there and scream for your blood. Jesus' suffering on Good Friday wasn't just physical, it was emotional as well. So Pilate says, okay, you want him to die, he'll die. He's not happy about it, but it feels like he has no choice. One of the other traditions was people that were being crucified on a cross were forced to carry their cross. So Jesus is exhausted by this point, hurting physically again, emotionally too. He falls while he's carrying the cross, so the guards that are with him just call some random guy out of the crowd, Simon of Cyrene, and they make him carry the cross up to the top of the hill. As Jesus hung on the cross, people were just mocking him mercilessly. That was the other difficult part. Being so humiliated while you're enduring this intense pain. And they try to provoke him. They say, if you're really God, come down here. Why are you still up on that cross if you're still God? You certainly would have the power to get off that cross. The truth of the matter is, Jesus could have been off the cross like that if he wanted to. But if he would have come down, he couldn't have saved us from our sins. So, Jesus has the power to not go through with this, but he does. It's his love that keeps him up on the cross. Jesus doesn't respond to any of these taunts. He just stays silent. There's seven different phrases that we have recorded of Jesus' words. None of them are in anger. None of them are, telling people to shut up or anything like that. In fact, he even prays for the people that are killing him. He says, Father, forgive them, for they don't know what they're doing. The sign on Jesus' cross read, Jesus of Nazareth, King of the Jews. Pilate did this on purpose. He was not happy with the Jewish leaders. They'd kind of forced his hand. So this was his little way of kind of irritating them and saying, I did what you said. Here's your king. Kind of mocking them in a way. Now, Jesus was on the cross for 6 hours total. That's a long time. 6 hours hanging up there. For 3 hours, and the 3 hours before he died, from noon until 3, it got super dark, incredibly dark, and there's no scientific reason for it. The other thing people will say, it was just an eclipse. They'll try to offer a natural explanation for that. Here's the thing. An eclipse can't take place when the moon is full. That's reality. You can't get around that. It's a scientific fact. Eclipse can happen when the moon is full. Now, the Passover would take place at the same time every year during this month of Nisan, which is around April, May for us. And the way that they scheduled this Passover was to find the springtime full moon. There's no other explanation for this eclipse other than it was God's doing. And according to, you look back at historical documents from this time, people could see this darkness in Egypt, in Greece, in Rome, in China. So this is a special thing. It's not just random. 3 hours before Jesus died, the world goes black. Jesus cries out, my God, why have you forsaken me?" That's a pretty heart-wrenching thing for us to read and understand. He's feeling the pain of hell. That's really the worst part of hell, is being separated from God. We have these cartoons and drawings or whatever that picture what's hell like. It's just burning, or it's just whatever you hate most in this life. That'll be what you go through in hell. It's way worse than that. Hell is being separated completely from God. And as Jesus is hanging on the cross, he's feeling that. So, my God, why have you forsaken me? That's rough. That's maybe the clearest demonstration for us of Jesus' love. This is his own Father forsakes him. Not because of anything Jesus had done, but because of what we've done. So, it's a hard truth, but it's love. That's what it comes down to. You want to know what love is? It's Jesus on the cross, feeling hell, so we don't have to. People during this time thought Jesus was calling out for Elijah. They say, hey, listen, he's calling for Elijah. It was kind of the superstition of the day that if you were in trouble, you could call out to the prophet Elijah and he would rescue you. Finally, it's time for Jesus to die. He gives up his life. He commits his spirit into his Father's hands. It's the same confidence we have, that when we die, anyone who dies that's a believer, they commit their spirit to God. The temple curtain, this incredibly thick curtain in the temple, at the time that right when Jesus died, it rips itself in half from bottom to top, which is not the way things normally rip. So again, it's showing that God did this. This wasn't just some random thing. But that shows that the distance between us and God has been ripped. By Jesus' sacrifice, by his work of salvation, we and God are brought back together again. There's no curtain in between us anymore. The centurion, kind of neat thing, the guy that's in charge of killing Jesus, after he sees all this, looks at Jesus and Jesus' body and says, surely this man is the Son of God. So out of this awful situation, there's a believer, a guy that was convinced. After Jesus is dead, they are going to throw his body in a mass grave with other criminals. But Joseph of Arimathea, this wealthy guy, steps up and says, I'd like his body. I'm going to bury it in my tomb. Joseph was actually a member of the Sanhedrin, otherwise known as the group that had just gotten Jesus killed. But he had become a believer over time. And this was an incredibly bold thing to do. He could have lost his life for this. So he puts Jesus' body in his own tomb. A group of women witnessed this. So the long and the short of it is, Jesus was really dead. Some people like to put out the theory that he just passed out for 3 days. He wasn't. He was completely dead. The Roman soldiers, this was their job, to kill people. They wouldn't have made a mistake. Jesus, he was dead. Early on Easter morning, Jesus rose from the dead and passed through his burial wrappings. He's alive. It's as simple as that. That's it. There's not a lot of words written about it other than Jesus was dead and then he's alive. You can read through Matthew 16 and see. None of the gospel writers witnessed it, the actual event of it happening, so none of them write about it. Just, Jesus was in the tomb, and they go there Easter Sunday morning, and he's gone. And they see him alive later that day. Many people in the world scoff at the idea of truth or moral absolutes. Jesus is truth. That's you can't get any more simple than that. Jesus Christ is the truth. He loved us. He died for us. He rose again. Jesus' death was absolutely necessary for our salvation. There's no other way around it. Jesus had to die in order that we wouldn't have to go to hell. And finally, Jesus really rose again from the dead. It wasn't pretend. It wasn't a hoax. He was dead for real, and then he was alive for real. And because of that, you and I don't need to fear death. One day, we will rise again from the grave and join Jesus in heaven forever. God bless your lesson.